Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Riqueza podcast. Today, we have a very, very, very special amiga with me. She's amazing. I've known her for a long time, and to me, she's an idol. Even for Zany, my partner, she loves this individual. And so, drum roll, please. We have Miriam Lara-Mejia. She is La Gorda feminista on social media, produces the most educational, interesting, and liberating content on Gordofobia. Honestly, for me, as a first gen and also who's on the thicker side and who has always struggled with my body image, I never even knew that half the issues that I felt were culturally systemic. There's taxes and money involved with all of this, and I had no idea until, honestly, I listened to Miriam. I watched your content. So, Miriam, I would love for you to introduce yourself to my community.
Well, hola, hola. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, so I am Miriam Lara feminista, and I am Mexican. I was born in Mexico and grew up in Mexico. My mom was American and was able to have kind of this duality, right? A bilingual, bicultural, binational. And my mom also had a larger body, and my whole family, we all have, we are fat. And for the longest time in all of our liberation, we can work on liberation for everybody else, right? I've been part of activism around worker rights, labor rights, environmental rights, women's rights. But when I first learned about weight stigma, like systemic anti-fatness weight stigma, it took me a while to really kind of understand, this was my life. I accepted that stigma and that harm towards me because I also believe the social myth that having a bigger body means you're a bad person, means you're not good, means you're immoral. I also believe that your body size is entirely up to you. I used to believe that too, right? And we now know the science is very sturdy, there's a lot of things that contribute to how our body is. Imagine if we stopped fighting our bodies and we just did the things that are good for our bodies no matter what size they were. So I am on a mission here to make Spanish language content that is, really good and sort of have stayed in the Spanish language sphere. It's a big commitment for me. Also, as a mom that has a kid, a lot of us, especially a lot of also white parents, they want kids to be bilingual. Well, we have to make sure we have Spanish language content. We have to really elevate Spanish in quality. But I am so excited to be here because I do think that there's this interaction with, the beauty tax and the fat tax. And we just have a lot to talk about the intergenerational violence that is body shaming. I call it a cultural sport, in the Latino community. Yeah. A ver, de quién te burlas más, and who do you make more fun of? So I think there's just so much to talk about. I'm just clearly bombarded everybody here. So anyways, I'm Miriam. Ahí nos vemos en la Gorda feminista.
Sí, no, pues gracias. You are an idol. You are someone I look up to and even reflect back on the moments where I face body dysmorphia or even just when society takes over, it makes me feel bad about myself. And so before we get started, I kind of want to share more about why this matters to me and why I want to have this conversation. So obviously I'm Latina. I also follow the same culture that a lot of us follow or grew up in, right? In TV, casi no mirabas a alguien morena o gorda en novelas. No mirabas a cantantes con lonjas, no mirabas celulitis, no mirabas muchas cosas que en realidad we experience just on a day-to-day basis. We see in our moms, we see in our own bodies. And so growing up, I was always on the thicker end. By the time I was 8 years old, I was already wearing teen clothes, and I would feel really insecure about it because I had primas who were a lot thinner, who would fit, it was 4T, 5T. In my upbringing, I remember all the clothes were sized by your age. Mm-hmm. And you were supposed to fit in those clothes by your age. And I never fit in them. And I would feel really insecure about my body. I'm telling you, from 7 years old. Me ponía hasta gauchos, which are now the trend, you know, leggings and everything like that, para disimular my insecurities of wearing jeans. Like, I didn't wear jeans a lot of my upbringing because I was so afraid of how my body looked. And no one consoled me on it. If anything, people just kept saying, Lia gorda, oh, mira Lia, sus cachetes, mira esto. And it developed over time into a body dysmorphia. And I want to be vulnerable with this because pues no se habla, de esto no se habla. And, you know, in this podcast, we talk about everything that we need to talk about that we don't like to talk about at home. And for me, when I think about my wealth and as I build my wealth, money also ties to the way that we spend on ourselves, on our bodies, the way that we perceive our bodies, the way we shop for our bodies. It's so important that we look at that and see how it's affecting us on a day-to-day basis. And now with like the power of TikTok and the power of Instagram, donde miramos how to lose weight here, how to get a nice butt here, how to get, you know, if celebrities are getting these injections. When we're seeing all this, and I'm like, you know, as an individual who has always struggled with my body image, and I'm still learning. I can't say that I fully love my body the way that I want to. And, you know, Media, I always text you, I'm like, I need help, you know, and I always go to your videos to find support and understand that I've been wired to think this way or to feel this way. At least that's what I feel like. And I know there's so much to unpack with that. So I would love for you to share kind of how gordophobia, or what is gordophobia in general? Like how does that affect us?
But before I jump, I want to talk about a couple things. One, not only did we not see gordas in novelas, when we saw gordas, what did the gordas do? La gorda siempre estaba comiendo, right? So let's talk about where we're hearing these things. Number 2.
Okay.
How on earth do we think that kids, I mean, like, why do we think that all the diversity we have in color, in height, and all these things, and we wouldn't have diversity in size? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, to think that all kids should fit, you know, all 8-year-olds should fit one size is crazy. Mm-hmm. And the third thing, I do think that I feel like what I love about your content, honestly, is the demystification. It's we've been told these things all our lives about money, about all these things, about how you spend your money. We've been told the same myths about our body, about weight. Yeah. And that's part of the work, right? So when we talk about gordophobia, and in English, the gordophobia comes from the English word fatphobia, okay? Mm-hmm. And I don't want anybody to get stuck on like what the word is, but the word is the way we perceive fat bodies and fatness as morally lesser, as inferior, as ugly, as bad. Now, the reason we have these ideas are 2 pieces. One piece is that we think, again, as I said, that our bodies are modifiable entirely by ourselves, right? Yeah. And that is absolutely like, this is not an activist point. This is a science-based point. Our body size is determined in the largest part by genetics, but by other factors as well, right? Like how much we sleep and our environment and all these other things. Yeah, what we eat and how we move have a little bit of significance, but it's really a small part of it. Now, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat, that, you know, we should still eat in ways that are nutritious for our bodies, and we should still move our bodies. But it's just not for losing weight, right? And the other myth, I mean, like this idea of like, where did this come from? We have one of the books is the most important book that for the origins of fatphobia, and it's called Fearing the Black Body: The Racial Origins of Fatphobia by Sabrina Strings. And she details the way that the reason that gordophobia and fatphobia is really truly cemented in racism is because when Europeans started the slave trade, when they started basically enslaving people from Africa, they created this whole idea: good bodies, thin bodies; moral bodies, beautiful bodies; black bodies, bad bodies; inhuman, they're not even human, right? Like that's how they justified the incredible violence of slavery. And at the same time that they were like creating this division, they sort of combined black bodies with fat bodies. And that's how fatness became this horrible thing that nobody should be, right? And the pursuit of thinness became the pursuit of beauty, the pursuit of, wealth, the pursuit of acceptability, right? And part of the work that we do right now, in fact, is questioning, when we talk about colonization and all the racial violence that has come through that, we have to start, racism, yes. We should start also with fatphobia because it's truly ingrained. And in the Latinx community, we can sort of see the incredible violence against women that fatphobia represents, right? Because why do we have such a significant group of people? Like, I always start my workshop with this question. Dime tú que estás escuchando, ¿cuántas mujeres tú conoces que se aceptan tal y como son? Que les gusta su cuerpo, right? How many? And you start to realize, not la morena no, la blanca no, la alta no, la baja no, la gorda, flaca, nobody. So that points to you that there's a systemic issue. I mean, what we call, the imperative of beauty, the idea that we should put all this energy, all this money, all this time to pursue this idealized body that which we will never achieve, right? Because the whole point is we have body diversity. There is nothing that is truer than that. Your body is different than mine. My body is different than somebody else's. We are all different. And so part of the activism around fatphobia is, and around all these like body issues that we're facing, is trying to center the fact that we have diversity, and that we have been taught. I mean, like, you see it in the Black community. For how long Black women have been told they're not beautiful because of the features that they have. And now we're entering an era where we're really fighting that, right? Like, you are beautiful with all the qualities. I mean, yes, like, como las rasgos indígenas. Ay, mira que indígenas se te ve el nopal en la cara, right? Like, all these things that they criticize you for, the kind of body that you have, of which you have no control. If your nose is wider or this. And actually, if your body's bigger, you don't actually have a ton of control over whether your body's bigger. You can do a lot of things to promote health for your body, but whether it's tall, whether it's fat, you don't have a ton of control over that. So a little bit of the work is around this topic is to kind of move the weight conversation out and really center how can we celebrate all bodies and how can we promote health, truly health, not skinny, but truly health in all bodies.
Damn, you just said so much. And I'm like, yes, preach. Meeting for president. Meeting for president. In realidad, it is looking at, when you said our weight is dependent on genetics, our bone structure, and I said food. And you're like, that only has this much part of it, right? And it's because all we see is diet. Your food matters.
You know why though, right? Money.
Yes. Money.
This is $1 trillion business. Look, like when we talk about questioning diet culture, we say, okay, look. Okay, everybody has tried a gazillion diets. We have all here in China, everywhere they've tried different diets, right? Why don't diets work? Well, they don't work for a variety of reasons. People study this, but they don't actually work. Right? So then there's the next diet and the next diet and the next diet. And what are we doing? Always money here, money there, right? There's actually studies that show, that are really significant studies that show that diets on the long term don't actually lead to weight loss. Okay? 95 to 98% of the diets do not lead to any weight loss after 5 years. But 75% of those diets lead to weight gain. Right? So, ¿qué pasa? Right? People go on a diet. And you know, la tía, you've done I've done the diet. I've done all the diets.
La pastilla.
The keto, la no sé qué. You lose the weight. Yes, in the first 6 months, in the first year, people lose weight. But actually, bodies, when they go on this restriction, the body has a response to this, right? And what happens is then you gain more weight. Then you do another diet, you lose weight, then you gain more weight, right? There are people who have pointed at this fact that, like, why Americans are fatter now than they were like 40 years ago, in part is diet culture, because these diets are causing this kind of reaction in our body. So the question here is, people who are studying like weight cycling. Weight cycling means that que bajas y subes, bajas y subes, bajas y subes. That process is more harmful to our bodies, to our health, to our risk of diabetes and heart disease and cardiovascular diseases than staying in your weight. But the thing is, we can, again, like, I want to separate tu peso and how much you weigh from things that are good for you, that help you live better, right? Which is not only food and not only exercise, because I think that those are really important. But the biggest thing that no one talks about, especially in the Latinx community, is stress. I mean, here we are, people facing like no time, like, pero, o sea, yo me pongo a pensar, like, I have a privileged life, a hugely privileged life, and I live stressed my whole day, the entire day. Now, if I had to work 2 jobs, if I had to like figure out how to get from point A to point B, if I had to commute, like, let's talk about stress. Let's talk about sleeping. Let's talk about managing your feelings. Let's talk about managing if you have a chronic disease, like for example, ADHD or not a disease, but like any condition that is impacting all these things, right? So, but the reason we focus on diet and exercise is because these 2 industries, the diet industry, the wellness industry, and the fitness industry are incredibly cash cows, right? So, I mean, in my content, part of the work that I do is like, I also want to talk about movement for all bodies, right? How do we get away from this idea of like, the only way you can move is if you have this $3,000 bike and, all
the Peloton bike with the screen, with a good coach y todo.
Yeah. So, I mean, for the Latinx community, I feel like there's a big, and then, I mean, I don't know if you follow, there's a bunch of people now who are dietitians who are questioning the kind of advice people have been getting, like, no coman arroz blanco. El arroz blanco es lo peor del mundo. And it turns out, you know how much, it's like 5 grams of fiber difference between arroz blanco y arroz integral, right? But people are demonized. Our Latino community gets demonized for the foods that we eat that are actually not even that bad, like they're like perfectly fine for you. So there's a lot of power in questioning. For me, the biggest como like aha moments, the one is that what I said before. When you realize nobody's happy, that's a question. That's a question. If the Kardashians, who are like the epitome of beautiful bodies, are not happy, they clearly hate their bodies, even if they have the most beautiful body. That's one piece. But the other piece is like, a ver, ¿dónde me están sacando aquí el palo? Porque like, always the pastillas, always la crema, always the this, always the next
always
thing,
esta
always
bebida,
the next
este
thing.
smoothie, este juice, yeah.
And when you get off that, and what is the propuesta? Okay, like people are like, okay, ¿y qué queda si no tenemos eso? Lo que queda es the movement, se llama salud en todas las tallas, health in all sizes, meaning you can be healthy if you have a larger body, and you can be unhealthy if you have a thinner body, right? Health can appear in all different ways. Queda la alimentación intuitiva. Like, how do we learn to feed our bodies with what they need? How do we learn to like follow our hunger, to really listen to our hunger? We know we get the movement in all bodies, the idea of like moving your body because you want to move your body because it makes you feel good, not because you're going to have la pompa de la J-Lo, like, really, really moving your body because it's good for you. And then like really moving the conversation around weight totally off the table, and really focusing. But at the same time, I think other things that for me are really important is like, especially with the Latino community, people are like, okay, se tienen que caminar 5 días a la semana. Okay, in Latino communities, do people have places to walk that are safe? Do people have places to walk that are, easy for their kids to go? ¿Tienen tiempo? Let's question the systemic part of it because, or like people are like, okay, let's eat all fruits and vegetables. Okay, in the pantry, the community pantry, are there fruits and vegetables? Do people have time to cook them and make them? Like, let's have these conversations because so much of the Latino community gets this crazy attack on like, everybody has diabetes. Diabetes, let's talk about the causes of diabetes: poverty, isolation, stress management. I mean, there's just like so much to question. So clearly there's a lot of pieces we can go.
Yes.
But I just feel like there's just so much power in recognizing why they're selling us this idea that only food and movement is what matters in this conversation.
And like you said, money talks, and I think, especialmente aquí en los Estados Unidos, el dólar, lo que uno gana de su medicina, de su inyección, de perder peso, como sea, is way more important than the actual salud de la persona.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you question, I always tell this story, of my mom. And my mom had Alzheimer's. And my mom was always fat her whole life. She did every diet. I mean, todo quien la conociera sabía que Mary había hecho la dieta del no sé qué, del medio pepino, de la media plátano, de la todo. And when she started to get more and more sick with Alzheimer's, and people didn't quite know yet, she would go out and people would be like, Mary, es que usted bajó tanto de peso, right? And that, to me, is the point, right? That's where we really get to see that we don't actually care about health. We care about thinness. And what you pointed out, like in the new weight loss drugs, you know, like we don't actually have any information about long-term impacts. You know, they're not meant to be taken forever, even though people are taking it for longer terms. People are having some crazy, you know, side effects, but no, nada de eso importa, because lo que importa es un cuerpo delgado, right? And this is the whole point of like health in every size, right? That there are people who are fat who are perfectly healthy. Mm-hmm. You know, the stats that we have from the US is like 30 to 40% of people who are labeled overweight are totally healthy in all the metrics, and 30% who are labeled normal weight are not, right? So it's like really not the metric that we're looking for. I think for Latinas also, there's this question about the beauty tax, right? Like how society tells us that our value comes from our physical appearance. And you can see it when you go to like meeting with Latinas and they're all decked out and all their stuff, because we've been told if we don't look like that, then we are not valuable. Then we are not good, you know, that we have to be extra, extra, extra. And for me, like, I mean, one of the pieces is like doing your hair, getting your hair done. Yeah. How many hours have you, I mean, quien está escuchando, a ver, ¿cuántas horas te has pasado en la peluquería, en las uñas, en la depilación? I mean, let's just like, even for a year, like I stopped doing Brazilian waxing when I was like, I'm spending like $800 a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's $60 a month, lo multiplicas, and then times that by the 5 years you do it, the 3 years que lo haces.
Yeah. And I'm saying, like, I'm not if you want to do it, do it. I'm not criticizing anybody. But when you start being like, okay, y el pelo me cuesta esto y esto y esto, like, who am I doing it for? Because if I'm doing it for me, chido. But if you're doing it because you think that that's your value comes from that, then we have to be like, okay, órale, because if you're doing it because you want to look like J-Lo or like La Chiquis or whoever, if you're really honest with yourself and that's you're questioning your what you're consuming, then you start to be like, a ver, porque I'm never going to look like J-Lo. I'm never going to look like anybody else but me. You're going to look like you. You're in, you know, and that's, you know, when I hear you say about the battles with, you know, with your image, it's not necessarily, I feel like I want to take it beyond you. It's not you. It's like this whole, if you've been told you're not good because you have a color of your skin, because your boobs sag, because you're whatever, if you've been told that since you were little, we all have this, you know? But imagínate, y nada más pongamos a imaginarnos, como tú dices, como la liberación que tú propones. Eso es lo que me gusta a mí. Like, la liberación que tú propones con el dinero, like, it's literally the same when we start questioning the beauty standard. When we start being like, what is the beauty standard? Why is it always centered on whiteness, thinness, el pelo más rubio, el pelo, you know, like all these things. And when you start questioning that, you like, it just like starts opening up this whole world.
So many doors. Yeah. I think for me, it started opening up when I realized the same thing, that I could not do every single dieta para perder peso. And it wasn't until la pandemia que me puse de, you know, comer sanamente, so eat more fruits and vegetables, manage my carb intake, and also listening to my body, like you were mentioning earlier, like, ¿qué necesita mi cuerpo? You know, ¿qué me está pidiendo mi cuerpo? And I was taking a step back and actually analyzing the things that I felt like my body was needing. De repente, like even today, se me antoja una ensalada, you know, like some days I crave fruits and vegetables, and I know that's my body telling me, like, queremos fruits and vegetables, o queremos proteína, o queremos algo adentro que te hace falta, you know, or agua, puede ser agua. You know, during the pandemic, I lost, I think it was 25, almost 30 pounds, porque estaba haciendo ejercicio, estaba comiendo bien, no salía, obviously, ni podía salir a comer afuera, y realicé, okay, if I can lose weight by just moving my body in ways that I love, because it was just, you know, weight training, and eating saludable, o para mi cuerpo, lo que me está pidiendo mi cuerpo, I was like, something's off here, because I've been trained my whole life that I had to restrict my diet. So most of the time, and I'm going to be very honest, when I feel like I need to lose weight, cuando me siento gorda, and I automatically feel shame and guilt, because my brain has been wired that way since my upbringing, because all I hear is my dad saying, Lia, te estás pareciendo tu mamá, when my mom is fat, and él le dice barriga sin fin, y él le dice todas esas palabras y yo lo escucho, you know, I feel bad for my mom. I try to defend, you know, and protect my mom and not do that. And so for me, it's like instilled when I hear my dad compare me to my mom, I'm like already shameful, already guilty about what I look like, right? So when I was able to lose weight, and let me tell you this, like I went home and my tia was like, Lia, te ves bien flaca. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, didn't you guys just call me fat like 3 months ago? Y yo ahora soy too skinny. Yeah, I get so confused sometimes of just how our culture is like, puede ser bien flaca or perfect or too fat. And it's never like we love ourselves just as we are.
You know? I mean, that you're pointing at body shaming, right? Like this is the piece around body control and control of women, especially, right? But I want to say two things. I want to say, one, you know, when we talk about intuitive eating and the idea of like really listening to our hunger, we really try to move away from like thinking only fruits and vegetables are good, because you know what? Having a cake because that's what you want is also okay. It's also good, right? And in fact, you saw it, right? Because when you really listen and you're like, okay, hoy, ¿sabes qué? Hoy quiero pancito con mantequillita. Your body, like, then is like, hey, I also want some salad. Hey, I also want, you know, like when we really allow ourselves to move away from restriction, we really end up eating just as varied as we imagine is what we want, you know? And I always share with my husband when I first met him, and he'd be like, aquí en la casa no pueden haber galletas, eh? No pueden haber galletas, because if a box came, he would eat them all, right? Because he had a restrictive space, right? And I said, especially men have a lot of this, right? Where they're like, no, restricción. And now that we follow intuitive eating completely in our house, we have so many things, so many sweet things all over the house. And like they don't disappear that way, because we really like, oh, se me antoja una, o no se me antoja, o lo que sea. The second thing that I want us to like invite a conversation here is, you know, part of el activismo anti-gordofobia is to really question why we think gorda is so bad, right? Si tu mamá es gorda, like, that's a description of her body, right? Besides the stuff that, I mean, what I'm hearing is your dad using that as a weapon to hurt somebody, right? But let's invite this conversation, especially in the Latinx community. Hey, we have a lot of people who have fat bodies. We are a lot of people who are fat. Let's really invite this piece of like, fat is not bad, in order to dismantle the idea of body supremacy, in order to say, hey, there are people who have bigger bodies. There are people who have smaller bodies. There are people who are brown, white, all these things. We have to dismantle the idea that a fat body is a bad body. Okay? Fat bodies exist. Fat bodies are okay. Your fat body is okay. No matter, even if you have an illness, your fat body is okay. I want us to really question that, because that's part of the work that I do. Yo tengo una sección que se llama Crianza Bodypositive, body positive parenting. And so much of that is, I want my son to understand from a very, like now he's 5, but he's been doing it since the beginning. I have a fat body and I am a good body. Okay, you, my little son, have a thin body and you're a good body. And so has a tall body and they're a good body, right? And someone that has only one leg, that is still a good body, right? Like, let's really, really, really push the envelope here, because gorda no es un insulto. That's part of the big thing. Like, when we start kind of understanding, like, I think there's other pieces here in the conversation that you're sharing with your dad. Like, there's machismo, and there's, you know, la violencia en contra de las mujeres. Es la idea, and what you're pointing at es la idea de que todo el mundo tiene el derecho a comentar. No, you don't. No, you don't. I don't, you know, like, you don't get to talk about people's bodies. That is not your job. Like, I just like my son the other day came and, you know, we were like taking a bath together, and he was like, Mami, ¿tú eres gorda? And I was like, ¿qué piensas, mi amor? And he was like, sí, yo creo que eres gorda. And I was like, sí, right? I mean, like, really taking como los colmillos off of this word. ¿Me entiendes? Mm-hmm. Entiendo, like, you know, especially for someone like you that has really fought your body size, right? Like, you like really want to be in a different body size. And that is work that we need to do, because what would happen if you accepted the size your body wanted to be in?
Yes, and that is what I've been working on maybe the last 3 months. So para ser bien honesta, and I've told you a little bit about how I feel sometimes, you know, the texteo, and I watch your videos. Like, I watch your videos a lot because para mí es un recordatorio que I've been systemically trained to think this way, the same way that we've been systemically trained to think money is bad. Being fat is also we've been systemically trained to think fat is bad too, and even culturally trained, and that even comes from colonization, like you mentioned earlier. And so I've been taking steps back, and especially since I found your content, I'm like, okay, Lia, tu cuerpo es diferente because your bone structure is different. Even when I remember when I did play soccer y perdí mucho peso, and I was like the thinnest ever in my life, I still had big hips. I still had, you know, thicker thighs. And when I look back at those pictures, and I do this often where I look back at when I say, oh my God, mira cuando estaba flaca, you know, to make me feel bad of where I am, I'm like, you know what, Leah, mi cuerpo is still the same. It hasn't really changed other than there's just more of me. You know, there's more of me, and I like cry, you know, because I think I'm trying to work on accepting who I am, and that I'm okay being fat or getting thicker or whatever term people want to use if they don't feel comfortable with the word fat. I'm accepting the word fat because I'm also in that journey of accepting that it's not bad. So even sometimes, even right now, if I'm checking in on myself, I can feel myself tense, you know, when I hear the word fat, because it's like an inner trauma thing. Like, fat is malo. It doesn't, and you're defining yourself in a bad way, is my head right now telling me. And I'm like, no, Leah, en realidad, I've been trained to think this. I have also been trained to feel ashamed of my body, because my dad, every time que me llama, me dice, Leah, why aren't you running a marathon like you used to when you were 17 years old? You were a lot skinnier then. Y ahora mira como te miras, te vas a, you know. And no. I'm like, yeah. Oh God, I'm growing up. Like, I know I'm becoming myself, and my body is evolving. And I cry about it. I feel ashamed about it. But then I have to take a step back, and I'm like, when I see, so I have a lot of plus size models that I follow because I think they're beautiful. Like, I generally think fat women and plus size models are beautiful. I look at them, I'm like, wow, they're so confident in themselves. They look confident in their bodies. And why am I not confident in my own? If this is my body that lets me wake up in the day, you know, that lets me go take a walk, that lets me go work out, that allows me to work and, you know, do the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. Why do I shame my body that gives me life? You know, and I'm always questioning myself, and I'm like comparing myself. And I know it's systemic, and it's also, like you mentioned earlier, the beauty standards that have been placed today. Because I sent you a video, and I'll put it in the show notes too to share if anyone wants to watch. But on TikTok, it's trending about how Jenny Rivera was huge on body dysmorphia and put it on into her kids, like fat shaming her kids. One of her daughters had to get a surgery as a kid in order to be skinny for her quinceañera. And también Chiquis was talking about how her whole life she struggled with weight, pero quería perder más peso. She's now taking shots of like injections, the ones that all the celebrities are taking right now to look like that cocaine skinny is what they're calling now. And when I watched that, it triggered me terribly, because I'm like, damn, come to find out she's been taking injections, and then her, you know, I'm like, wow, it's ingrained in our culture, and it's trauma because it comes from her mom. And I can't even wrap my head around it because it triggered me so bad. I was like, wow, so what am I doing? Do I need shots? In my head, like automatically it came to my head, like, do I need this to lose weight? And your voice comes into my head and is like, Leah, take a step back, and what's the root of this problem?
I think, you know, you're pointing at so many different things here, but the first one I want to say is like what you're sharing about your body struggles. I can bet you 100% that people listening here, all of them have that, right? Comparándonos, always being like, so-and-so has this. Okay, yes, they have a different body, you know? Let's really, really, really center that. You know, all this shame we feel, all the way that we look at photos and we're like, no mames, I used to think I was fat, and look at me, I was not fat, right? Or whatever, right? Like, because we have been carrying esa mochila. We've been carrying this mochila that is, again, not just like about body, but also about womanhood, right? Like this idea of like people being able to criticize us and that being okay. You know, that's like a thing, right? And we do it all the time. We open our Instagram and we're like looking at like so-and-so has this, so-and-so has that, right? Because this is like, we just still believe that we get to criticize other people's bodies, right? I feel like the Ozempic, especially the weight loss drugs that, you know, are all the rage right now, really point at this thing, which is we have not really questioned the root of our hatred of larger bodies. And until we do that, we will be prey. We will basically be como a la deriva, ready for the next thing, the next dieta, the next, right? Like at some point you will realize, let's get off this, right? Like you know, there's such significant research right now around bariatric surgery. Like the impact at 5 years, I mean, like it is, these are like, they sell it to you like, hazte la cirugía. You know what's the number one, like happens after that? Like malnutrition. People cannot absorb things. Then they have, I mean, like, so basically we want a thin body, but a sick body, right? I would say personally, and I think you're doing such a good job here, like when you share, like, I think when you see triggering content online, when you see someone, especially promoting or sharing weight loss or sharing about changing their body, right? Because you now that are listening to this, you're getting the semillita. This, when someone does that, they're not questioning the idea. They're not really truly embracing body love. They're really like, no one who really embraces and understands and accepts their body will be doing those things, right? I feel like it's so vulnerable that you share that you felt triggered. That's a red flag for us that allows us to be like, okay, let me take a step back. Like, let me really connect with people who are sharing other things. And at the same time, like, I think, especially in that como buchona, right? The buchona culture that Jenny Rivera used to be part of. Like, you cannot separate gordophobia, fatphobia from like machismo. It really, they're like intertwined. The idea that you have to have los senos así, la esta así are intertwined. So what I would like to say is I would invite people to read a book called The Beauty Myth, you know, but the idea of like our value as human beings based on our beauty, based on a beauty that is like totally determined externally to us, is what ends up harming us, right? I really like to point out like disordered eating and eating disorders are among the deadliest of the mental health issues that we face. And yet we still promote them, especially for people in larger bodies. Like if you're fat, you could have an eating disorder and people are like celebrating you because you're doing these things around like
I'm gonna
eating
go throw
disorder.
up, yay, lose some
voy a
weight.
throw up, o no voy a comer, right? Like what we really want, and I think that what you're sharing, like what we really want, like this is I'm gonna paint the picture. What we really want is for us as a society to really accept that people come in all shapes and sizes. People come in all weights and sizes, right? Like this is true, has always been true. Like, what do we do to help people live happier, healthier lives? And again, health is also like, again, they tell us health is all about food and all about exercise. No, health also has a lot of factors. And again, genetics plays a big role. How you manage your stress. How much do you sleep? How many drugs do you take? You know, where do you live? Are you exposed to, you know, pollution? Like these are all things that we need to be talking about and not just focus on food and exercise. And then I do feel like, you know, people come to my página all the time and they're like, when I talk about acceptance, they're like, ay, ustedes que huevón. I know you're not doing anything. You don't. I'm like, no, look at I actually promote people moving their bodies. I want fat people to move their bodies because as fat people, we've been told the only reason you move your bodies is to lose weight. And guess what? Science has proven like moving your body, exercise is not a good, like it will not lead to weight loss in the long term. It will lead to a lot of things. You will manage your stress better. You will sleep better. You will have better sex. You will have, you know, manage your ADHD. Like there's a lot of things that movement is going to do. Weight loss is not going to be one of them, right? But why have fat women, especially, have been told that, right? All the things around like food and like telling us like, no coman tortillas, no coman arroz, no coman, it's like all of those things are actually super fine. They're fine in your diet. Like go find people who are talking about moving away from centering only whiteness. You don't have to eat kale to be healthy.
Yeah.
You know?
Or get the ginger shot.
Or get the ginger shot. Like nuestra comida, all of our food is really good for us. Like
Sí.
los tacos are nutritious. Like how
High
do we
in
get to a place
protein.
where you're like, yeah, high in protein. Las tortillas, super nutritious. Some fat, okay. Like you can figure out different ways to do it. Like I'm just saying, like aguas frescas are amazing, right? Like let's really question in this conversation, especially I feel like the crossover brand here is let's question the ideas that have been told to us that benefit someone else and not us, right? The money ideas that benefit other people, keeping us like depressed and following these things. Let's question the beauty ideal that is based on white bodies that are not even our bodies, right? Like let's really like celebrate our food, our bodies, our beauty, because honestly, like at the end of your life, you get there and you're like, you realize, you look back and you're like, shit, like I should have been really focusing on me and who I am and all the beautiful things that you are as a human. So that's, yeah. It's just like, I get like everything I love.
No, es cierto, because at the end of the day, we're acknowledging, okay, you know what, en nuestra cultura, we are shameful, we have machismo, we have white supremacy, perception, capitalism is involved in this because, again, they saw that there's an opportunity here, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I was actually doing some research, and the Ozempic drug is a $59 billion industry as of last year. Billions of dollars, right? And it's growing at 23% every single year. It grew from 23% from last year to this year. And when we think, for me, as someone who thinks like a business person, and when I got triggered listening to Chiqui say that she has been taking this drug in order to lose weight, I'm like, okay, let me see the root of the problem here. So this drug, okay, not accessible to everyone, happened to have, like, the next video that came up was, where can you find this shot and how much does it cost? Okay, it is not cheap. It is not cheap at all. She was saying in Mexico, I can find it for like $300. And I'm like, okay, ¿quién va a pagar $300 mensuales para tomar or para inyectar esto, para perder peso? I'm like, okay, first of all, accessibility, right? A lot of Latinos don't have $300 to spare for the shot, but they're willing to risk it if they can lose weight fast. Because aquí, and it's the same thing of money. It's like, how can I make money fast? How can I lose weight fast? And it's this idea that, okay, like going back, where's this root of the problem? Now, money's involved. Money is involved because now you say, okay, it's $300 to buy this. You lose weight fast. Okay, every individual that pays $300 or more, like that was just an example. It varies by, country, state, y todo, where you insurance también. Regardless, this is all money being made to profit an image that we cannot naturally attain. So if we even go back to the days of Kim Kardashian, right? So the days that Kim Kardashian came out and was like the fat ass, the tiny waist, big boobs. That was the huge rage. I remember in like high school, college, everybody wanted to look like Kim Kardashian. And they still do. But have you seen how Kim Kardashian has completely changed? She's taken that specific drug that every celebrity is on. It's talked about all over social media, even on the news. You can find it if you wanted to. But again, it's money that they have money to move and change their bodies. So then I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, it's one, for accessibility purposes, it's for the other, right? And there's an analysis based on like colonization that, like, for example, in Europa back in the day, when spices used to be a luxury, and those who were poor didn't have access to spices, right? Or anything, like it was very bland food. And when those who were poor got access to spices and could, get, flavor into their food, what did the rich reinos, do? The elite do? They made their food without sazon, because they wanted to follow the complete opposite. And then we're constantly chasing that desire. Like, okay, when we go eat at restaurants today, when you go to a 5-star restaurant, half the time, that food no tiene sazon. You know what I mean? And it's because we think that, okay, that perception of what we want to attain costs a shit ton of money. Like a BBL costs so much money, right? And I was even looking on statistics, like 20,000 people get BBLs every single year, right? Yeah. Every single year.
No, I mean, I think...
And it's all money that's being moved.
I like the comparisons. I feel like part of the Ozempic, this Ozempic is one of the named drugs, right? But like the generic
Yeah.
is the magic, right? Is the magical thinking. Is the like como exacto. Nada más haces esto y pum, ya haces, you're like weight loss or or you get the $1 million whatever, right? Like it's the same scam. And for Ozempic, the thing is like there's two pieces. One is like you will gain that weight. You will gain that weight after you stop taking the pill, the injection. And again, like when we go back to the research and we say like, is it weight cycling, like bajar de peso, subir de peso, bajar de peso, that is damaging your body. That is actually a leading cause around like a lot of the non-communicable diseases that we see, like, around heart health and stuff. But two, I think like now that we start seeing like beyond, like people who are mixing their own type of, like people are getting this drug from places that are not reputable, right? Like, and like, we don't even have research long-term for Ozempic. We like, imagine like some places that people are getting it. So like, I'm worried about the industry in Mexico because people do go a lot to the border to get BBLs, to get all this kind of stuff that is not regulated by anybody, so putting their life at risk for the like few minutes or moments, right? And that's kind of, I feel like where, this piece of like, people don't see it this way often, but when we celebrate people for weight loss and don't see the long term, right? ¿Qué pasa? Que ves a la gente baja de peso, pero cuando sube de peso, ya se nos olvida que hicieron algo para bajar de peso, que es probablemente la razón por la cual subieron de peso, right? And that's where like we don't see we just see como así, ¿me entiendes? Like horses. We only see, bajó de peso, mira qué guapa.
Queremos mirar, yeah.
Ay, qué celebración. Yeah. Celebrating people for weight loss, again, is such a harmful thing we do. We don't see it that way, right? Because we still believe that the only good body is a thin body. So part of it is like, yes, I feel like there's a couple of pieces here, like about questioning how we see fat bodies. One, we have to understand why we think fat bodies are bad. Two, we really have to start educating ourselves. Like, si te incomoda decir la palabra gorda, decírtela a ti misma o hablar sobre de forma neutral. Unas personas son gordas, unas personas son delgadas. Like, this is not there's no odio behind that. Like, let's really take on this idea that like only, this white supremacy idea that only thin bodies are good. But I think you're also pointing out what we call, this sort of like la moda del cuerpo, right? And the body modifications that we see, like when we talk about the Renaissance and we see the larger bodies, those were also like women used to be really thin and didn't have, the time to have bigger bodies. So the bigger bodies were actually also a type of like pushing women to be this ideal that they couldn't be. Now people didn't have an excess of food, whatever. And now we have the opposite, right? Like it's always the trend. It's always a trend. So the question is, how do we get off this trend? How do we get off this idea like you should always be modifying your body, always trying to get, y si no tienes tetas, ahora sí quieres tetas, and all the ways that we harm our body to reach this body that is not our body, and especially also like, I know you have a variety of audiences, but like as we get older too, we get told like, I mean, when you said about your dad, like, why are you not like when you were 17? It's like, cause I'm not 17, our bodies are changing. Yeah, maybe your body is bigger right now because bodies, we literally change all the time, or like if you have a baby, literally the minute the baby's born, people are telling you, you should have your body like you were before. Pero ya no, mi cuerpo ya cambió. Like it literally changed. It made a huge human in my body. Like that we have this idea that bodies should stay the same. Bodies don't stay the same. So I'm actually like, that's one of the reasons why I kind of feel proud of being like a 42-year-old Latina, body positivity creator, because I want people to see like it's okay to have like the arrugas. It's also, I mean, like we haven't even touched on like arrugas, like my suegra spends literally $1,500 a year in just like cremitas that do nothing, ¿me entiendes? Like, and she would in a heartbeat get surgery and stuff. There is such a risk, like to our health. But I think there's just like so much potential in like really socializing this conversation of like how we've been taught to hate our bodies. When people finish this episode, I want people to kind of take this question and really be like, how has that benefited you? How has hating your body benefited you. It's benefited companies that make money off you hating your body. And when you start to be like, how do I get out of this? Like, honestly, mi invitación is like, just start following people in social media that have different kinds of bodies than yours. You know, black bodies, brown bodies, indigenous bodies, fat bodies, people with disabilities bodies. Like, let's really bring this conversation around body diversity. Let's see yourself as part of this diversity, not as lesser than or not enough of, you know, like, let's really just own our space in this world. And they're like, it's just so much. There's therapy, there's people like doing a lot of really good work to help us. But like, when you get to a point of like really respecting and accepting your body, you start to see how much freedom and how much love and how much money you get to keep because you're no longer chasing a body that's not yours. And again, like, this is not to shame. If you want to do all the things. There's no shame here. Like, we all are living in a world that tells us we have to change our body to be good. I'm not, no shame to anybody. But if there's a semillita plantada ahí para alguien that is like, I'm done. I don't want to hate my body. I want to like love my body. There's just like so much out there. And then a little, you know, I know there's some mommies listening, but like, you know, I feel like one of the big things that mommies can do and papis can do is stop criticizing people's bodies, other people's bodies, your kids' bodies, your own body. Like, it's a practice, but I do feel like we have a lot of power there to really break this, because it's just such a generational curse that we've been fighting.
Yeah, it's something that, as a product of that curse, deals with every single day, you know. And you're right. I'm going to tell people how like I've been navigating through it, because I think this year, at the beginning of the year, I had a very hard moment with myself, and like times where I just cry about my body. I'd be rude to my body. My partner would, you know, point it out, and he'd be like, Leah, the way that you're talking to yourself is not nice. You can't be walking around here and telling yourself you're ugly, tus celulitis que esto y que las llantas que eso. No, that's not, like, hear yourself. If you could, you know, record yourself and hear what you're saying to yourself, would you want someone else to say that to themselves? I'm like, no. And it was just a lot of hate that I would shift to myself and my own personality, like my body. And I took a step back and I was like, you know what? It's not about the weight loss, Leah. It's about loving yourself. Remember, Leah, you're trying to love yourself as you are, as you have been given this beautiful body to embrace. And, you know, I also gained a lot of weight because I was in love. I loved love, and the way that we expressed love was through eating and, you know, having a good time and, you know, staying up late and watching movies and eating palomitas and chucherias. And she's like, you know, and my partner's really good at like pointing out the fact. She's like, you gained weight because you were happy. You gained weight because you were living your bestest life for yourself, for us, and it's okay. And this is not forever either. Your body is so ever evolving. And it was very true, because I was very depressed. I was very anxious, and my body was a part of that. Like, my body was the part of me that I would bully in my moments of depression and anxiety, because mental health has a big thing to do with also body dysmorphia and the way that we talk to ourselves and everything. So when I was more stressed and depressed, I was more rude to myself. And when you pointed that out, I was like, damn, that's so true, because that's a correlation that I see in myself. And so I also shifted my attitude, and I was like, you know, instead of shaming myself and telling myself all these mean things and crying about it, let me do something about it for myself. Let me do something that I love, that is movement. And actually, you're the person that implemented that into my mind, that I'm going to move my body. I'm not going to exercise. I'm going to move my body. I'm actually going to remove the complete word exercise from my vocabulary, because that triggers me. It triggers me to think that I have to lose weight. So I'm just going to go to yoga to move my body, because in yoga, they don't call it exercise. They call it just moving your body, you know, stretching and everything like that. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do things that I love to move my body, because thanks to Miri, she told me that it would be more helpful for me to say it like that, because it is true. We're just moving our body. And by just moving my body has naturally adjusted itself, you know, to lose a little bit of weight. And even that, I was like, damn, I was just in stagnant energy. I was depressed. I was, you know, anxious. I was shaming myself. And because I shamed myself, I even saw myself in a more horrible light than I even was. and by just shifting one attitude, just the attitude of loving myself and giving myself grace and being like, move your body, I've already seen a shift in my mind and the way that I look. And I'm just trying to be like, you know what, Leah, your body's gonna ever evolve, and just love yourself in the moment that you're in.
You pointed at so many good things. And what I want to say is that, loving, like really sitting and being like, I love myself is not the goal. I think you already actually said it. What we want is a relationship of respect and with our bodies. What can we do in our daily life to really like honor our bodies, right? And it might be movement, and it might be eating, sometimes it might be eating the cake, sometimes it might be eating the salad, sometimes it might be, rest. Body liberation is not the same as like standing and naked and being like, I absolutely love everything about me, right? It's really like, how do we get, like when we do body positivity right, we really hone in on how to live in the best way we can. How do we live joyfully and pleasurably and beautifully with our bodies, as they are. And I love that you share this piece around happiness, like it's why we gain weight when we are happy, maybe signals to us that our body naturally has a larger body, right? And like being able to kind of accept that reality of like what you enjoy. I mean, like, I love the idea of like, you've enjoyed your body. One piece around body positivity is sexuality too, right? It's about really knowing and like being able to give our body love. And I love the tip that you shared about this. It is true that like one of the pieces around control, like one of the reasons around eating disorders is that we punish our bodies, right? That we think we have all the control over our bodies, and we don't, but I love what you shared about being cruel to our bodies as a way of expressing what we're feeling into the world. And now what you're saying is, imagine if you did the opposite. Imagine if we, in fact, our bodies became the home that they are. It's the place at which we experience the world. There's an origin to gordophobia and to weight stigma, and it comes from racism, and it comes from white supremacy. So that's like one piece. Two, there are multiple $trillion businesses that are built on the idea that if you hate your body, you will do these things to change your body. Mm-hmm. So, like a little semillita, what would happen if we just suddenly didn't hate our bodies? What if suddenly we were like, some of us are this way, some of us are that way, and all of it, todos los cuerpos son geniales, all bodies are good. And then like the third piece for me is about health. It's about like, we know that when we remove weight from the conversation, we really can help and support people having, doing things that support their health that are not just food and exercise, but also, again, like, I really want to stress, like, when we talk about these things, we talked about stress, and we have to talk about trauma, and we have to talk about discrimination, we have to talk about sleeping and drugs and all these things that help contribute to our health. So when we can make people feel good about their bodies and about themselves, they tend to do more things that help their bodies and themselves. And so that is really the investment. Like, people are like, pero es que si de repente decimos que los gordos están bien, everybody's going to just eat Oreos. And this has been studied. Like, there are decades of people in this, health for all, in all bodies, in all sizes. We know that when we stop restricting food, people eat more varied. When we stop telling people that exercise is just for weight loss, people move their body more. These are well studied things. So like, there is a true investment in our society and our communities. If you're in your riqueza, in your wellness journey, in your wealth journey, like, there is a real investment in like creating more peace and love and liberation with our bodies. And so start with you. I mean, you cannot change tu papa. You cannot change people outside of you, but you can do the work yourself. And yes, I do want to say, let's start this conversation. Gorda no es un insulto. Fat bodies exist and fat bodies are good, and like, let's really start like shifting the conversation here. So more of us can like really sit and be able to like live our lives as fully as we can.
Amen.
Amen.
Maybe for president 2024. So I always ask every single guest, and you kind of said it just now, but what does riqueza mean to you?
Yeah, for me, riqueza means the capacity to like really exist in your reality. And that means to really know your body and know yourself. It means to really know what you have in your life, the people, the connections, the privileges, also los retos, right? And it also means the willingness, the capacity, and the tools to reach further. And the last one would be, as a mom, to be able to share the wealth and all the magicalness that word encompasses with the next generations.
Oh, I love that. That's the best response I've heard, because it is pasarlo al generación que viene too. Like, it's the next generation, because yes, we're alive and we're doing this for us too, pero es lo que viene también, you know, breaking the generational curses, ending the things with us.
Well, not even, I mean, like, nothing, I mean, let's just also be clear, like, people are like, oh, yo ya soy body positive, yo ya, mis hijos ya, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. Like, this has all happened, like, we're still in this work. I want to end with this. Like, I like to gamify a little bit my life. You know, and then you probably see people, you know, like, we have a lot of retos, right? Like, people, like, for example, in body acceptance, maybe you have a good racha and you feel so good, and then, like, something happens, you see something in, you know, in social media, the Ozempic thing, like, all these things, and then suddenly you're like, oh shit, like, where am I, right? I like the idea of, like, this, everything we do is a practice. Everything, we recommit to the practice. And you know what? You don't have to be like sanada en tu relación con tu cuerpo to teach your kids that. Them seeing you do the work, them seeing you like, yeah, you're trying to build wealth. Maybe you mess up here. Maybe you mess up there. You're trying to build more body love. Maybe you mess up here. That work, like, perfection does not exist. And I want people to listen, like, there is no like así como que ya pum pum. No, this is constantly, we're working on this. We're practicing it. Se nos como la meditación, like se nos desviamos, we just, you know, like, and I feel like that is so powerful to remember that we are in a process.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I can't even add anything to it, because es cierto, even with your wealth journey, it's the same thing. Todos estamos en el proceso de, you know, de los highs and lows in life. La economía baja y suba, you know, that's part of life, and we have to adjust accordingly. And so thank you for doing the work. Thank you for showcasing that and the love that you have, not only for the work, but how you're sharing this journey with your niñito, and how you talk to him. And, you know, to me, it's like, I wish my mom would have talked to me like that, you know? So, like I said, thank you so much for everything that you do.
No comparaciones, No comparaciones. We try not to compare with each other, but yes, I really appreciate all that you do as well, because I think we're all trying to get a place of healing. We're all trying to heal, and we're trying to offer that into the world. And I just love also all that you do, and congrats on your most recent award. You know, it's really powerful, and, you know, really focus on the Latinx community. Let's really build that up.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So to the listeners, make sure you share this with your mommy, your papi, your prima, your primo, everybody in your family, to sembrar esa semilla, to open your eyes, open your perspective on this conversation, and hopefully to reduce a little bit of that shame and guilt that we have naturally just by saying the word fat.